Welcome to our channel. We hope you enjoy today's video. Enjoy watching.
After my daughter, Mia Gonzalez, was declared brain dead, my husband Lucas Gonzalez urged me to sign the consent form to donate her organs. I was consumed by deep grief and on the verge of emotional collapse. It was then that I accidentally discovered that her treating doctor, Dr. Blanca Linares, was Lucas's former lover. They had lied to me about Mia's condition to deceive me into signing the document, all to steal her heart and save Blanca's daughter, Sofia. I saw Lucas picking up Sofia from the hospital, and the three of them smiled together like a perfect, happy family. When I confronted them, they pushed me from the top of a building, and I died from the fall. Given a second chance, I returned to the day when I was supposed to sign the donation form, with Mia lying in the hospital bed, surrounded by tubes and machines. I silently vowed that this time, they would pay with their lives for what they did to my daughter. Mia's pale face was tinged with a sickly red hue, and I rubbed my eyes in disbelief, having returned to this heart-wrenching moment from my past. With trembling hands, I took Mia's warm hand, and my heart ached as tears streamed down my face. "Mommy misses you so much, I miss you," I whispered, choking on my emotions. My husband, Lucas Gonzalez, touched my shoulder gently, his voice cold and calm. "Don't disturb her anymore, it's time," he said, forcing me to move my trembling legs. We left the intensive care unit and sat in a small office, where Lucas placed a pen in my hand. "You've seen it for yourself, every second Mia stays alive after brain death is just suffering for her," he said, pointing to the donation form. "Sign it, let her rest in peace." As I heard his cold, calculating tone, a wave of hatred washed over me, drying my tears instantly. I dropped the pen on the desk and pushed his hand away from my shoulder. "I won't sign it, Mia is not brain dead." Lucas seemed taken aback, but I knew the truth. In my past life, I had trusted him too much. Mia had been admitted to this renowned hospital for pneumonia, but I never imagined that Dr. Blanca Linares, her assigned doctor, was Lucas's former lover. Mia's pneumonia shouldn't have been fatal, but after just one night outside the hospital, her condition suddenly worsened, and she was rushed to intensive care. When I returned, Blanca told me that Mia was already brain dead, and before I could process this devastating news, Lucas dragged me to sign the donation form. He manipulated me with his words, saying that Mia was always generous and that her life could save others. I was so distraught, half forced and half convinced, that I ended up signing the form. What I didn't know at the time was that as soon as the ventilator was removed, Mia's heart would be transplanted immediately to Sofia, Blanca's daughter, who was born with a severe heart condition. While I was lost in grief over Mia, Lucas quickly returned to his normal life. One day, I saw him at an amusement park in a nearby city, carrying a girl on his shoulders while Blanca leaned lovingly on him. They were the picture of a perfect family. I followed them, and when I finally confronted them about the truth, they joined forces and pushed me from a building. I lay in a pool of blood, clutching the locket that held a lock of Mia's hair. I remembered all the times I had wanted to escape this world, but seeing the happiness on their faces, hatred consumed my weakness. In that moment, I vowed that if I had a second chance, I would avenge my daughter. Now, with time turned back, I felt only gratitude. Even heaven wanted me to avenge my daughter. Thinking this, I wanted more than anything to slap Lucas's false face. "I'm going to transfer Mia to another hospital for a new diagnosis," I said, looking at him. "I will never sign that form." Lucas's expression changed, and he frowned. "Layla, stop being irrational. You went home last night, but I was here all night, watching the whole process. I know you're hurt, but this is the reality. Please control your emotions." I let out a bitter laugh. "You're asking me to control my emotions when my daughter's life is hanging by a thread. Why did I go home last night? It wasn't because your mother said she was feeling unwell and forced me to take care of her." Lucas's face showed a flash of annoyance. "Stop blaming my mother, stop blaming me. It's Mia's fate that was unfortunate. You agreed to sign the form before, and now you're backing out. Don't you think you're being too emotional?" I didn't bother responding to his insensitive attitude. All that mattered was transferring Mia to another hospital for a proper diagnosis and treatment. The Lucas in front of me was no longer the man who used to play barefoot in our small rented apartment, splashing water on the floor with Mia. Without saying another word, I pushed the office door open and headed towards the ICU, dialing a familiar number on my phone. I hadn't spoken to my family in 7 years, since I married Lucas. They had been completely against our relationship, and I had left behind my family's fortune to start from scratch with him in another city. But now, the only hope of saving Mia was my family, who had always supported me. When the call connected, I couldn't even explain, barely able to pronounce words before breaking into tears. "Mom, please save my daughter. She needs to be transferred to the best hospital in the state." Without hesitation, my parents contacted the best medical team in the region. After hanging up, I looked at the clock on the wall. There were 2 hours until the transfer team arrived. Just then, Lucas rushed in, looking panicked. "Layla, what are you doing? Stop causing a scene and come sign the form. We agreed on this, and the whole medical team is waiting." I ignored him, keeping my gaze fixed on the ICU doors. When I didn't respond, Lucas grew agitated. "Stop standing there doing nothing. Let's go, don't make the doctors wait." I turned to him with a cold stare. Mia is still lying in the ICU, and all you can think about is harvesting her organs. Your face has changed, clearly nervous. "What are you saying? It's our daughter. How can you be so insensitive?" Lucas's face changed, and he said, "But she's brain dead. There's no possibility of recovery. She's just an empty shell, and donating her organs is something meaningful. Mia always said she wanted her life to have value when we watched those documentaries together on TV. Isn't this fulfilling her wish?" My hands trembled with anger as I listened to his words. I remembered how a few months ago, Lucas had suggested we watch documentaries about organ donation together. Mia had watched them with tears in her eyes, so kind even at a young age. But now, I realized that everything had been part of Lucas's plan, Mia's kindness, my trust, everything had been manipulated by Lucas. Gathering all my strength, I slapped him hard on the right cheek. "Get out of here. No one is going to touch Mia, I'm going to transfer her." Lucas took a step back, holding his face in shock, as he shouted at me. "Do you think this is right? You're forcing her to stay in this world just because you can't let her go. You're giving her a worse fate than death. What's the point? Her muscles will atrophy, she'll develop bed sores, her body will start to decompose while she's still alive. Why subject her to that pain instead of letting her go in peace?" I looked at him fixedly, not recognizing the man in front of me. Behind his speech filled with false concern, a cold and calculated plan was hidden. Just as things were getting tense, a figure approached, running, and grabbed Lucas. It was my mother-in-law, Sandra Gonzalez. Her eyes were filled with concern as she looked at Lucas's swollen face, then turned to me with an expression of anger. "Layla, how could you hit Lucas like that? You're acting like a mad woman. Mia's condition has no hope, and it's not Lucas's fault. Stop taking it out on him. What's wrong with signing the donation form? The dead don't come back to life." When Sandra finished yelling at me in the middle of the hospital corridor, I felt like her voice was piercing through me, not because of the pain of her words, but because of the desperation I felt, knowing that everyone around me was part of a network that wouldn't stop at anything to take my daughter away from me. My hands trembled, but this time not with fear, but with a contained rage that burned inside me. Each of her words resonated in my head like a deafening echo. How could she be so cold? How could she reduce Mia's life to an empty shell? I clenched my fists, feeling my nails dig into my palms. My gaze didn't waver from hers for a second. I had to stay firm, even if everything inside me was crumbling. I took a deep breath and let my words cut through the air. "Sandra, listen to yourself. How can you talk about me like I'm nothing? She's my daughter, my baby. I don't care what you or Lucas think. I'm not going to sign anything. Mia stays here until the transfer team arrives. If you try anything, I swear I won't stop until I destroy you." Sandra's expression changed, and for the first time, I saw a mix of incredulity and fear. I didn't say anything more, but inside, a thought repeated like a mantra, I'm not going to lose this battle. Sandra snorted, as if my words meant nothing, but I could see her fingers clenching around the purse she was carrying. She took a step towards me, her cheap but penetrating perfume invading the space between us. Layla, this is ridiculous. You're acting like we're enemies. We're all suffering here, but what you're doing isn't rational. Don't you see you're getting left behind? Lucas is exhausted, the doctors are frustrated with you, and I just want what's best for my granddaughter. You're not the only one who loves her. Her tone was a strange mix of condescension and false compassion, as if she really thought she was helping me come to my senses. But those words, we're all suffering, almost made me laugh out loud. Suffering? She had no idea what suffering was. Alone, I repeated, crossing my arms. Sandra retreated, perhaps because of the tone of my voice or the determination she saw in my eyes. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked towards the ICU, each step feeling like a declaration of war. When I arrived at the ICU door, I felt a knot in my stomach. The rhythmic sound of the machines filled the air, and the sterile smell of the hospital seemed stronger than ever. There was Mia, my little one, lying in that bed that seemed too big for her fragile body. I approached slowly, feeling my legs tremble with each step. Her face was so pale it almost seemed like a porcelain doll, but she was there, alive. I gently stroked her cheek, letting my hand feel the warmth. Mom's here, my love, I whispered, although I knew she couldn't hear me at that moment. I couldn't avoid the tears that fell, but this time they weren't tears of sadness, but of fury. I wasn't going to let anyone take away what was left of her life. As I stood there, I heard a noise behind me and turned to see Lucas standing in the doorway. His expression was a mix of impatience and anger. Layla, this is enough, he said. You can't keep her here like it's some kind of whim of yours. You're being selfish. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it was laced with venom. I looked at him fixedly, feeling the anger boil inside me. Selfish? I repeated, letting the word hang in the air between us. I took a step towards him, not breaking eye contact. Lucas, the only selfish one here is you. Mia is not a sacrifice for your plans. If it's really about her, then you should support me in saving her life, not giving it away to someone else. His face hardened, but he didn't say anything. In the silence, I understood that my words had hit the mark. Lucas pressed his lips together, clearly trying to maintain his calm, but his eyes betrayed the frustration he was trying to hide. You have no idea what you're talking about, Layla, he said. This hospital has the best doctors, and they all agree on the same thing, Mia is not going to wake up. You can't fight against science, no matter how much you want to. His tone was so condescending that it made me want to scream. I crossed my arms, planting myself firmly. Mia stays here until the transfer team arrives. His face tensed, and for a moment, I thought he was going to respond, but he only let out a heavy sigh. He took a step towards me, invading my personal space, as if trying to intimidate me. You know what you're doing, he said. You're destroying everything, our family, our stability, everything. Because you can't accept reality. Do you really think you can fight against fate? His voice was low, almost a growl. I looked him straight in the eye, feeling the hatred bubble up inside me. Fate has nothing to do with this, Lucas. This is about your lies, your betrayals. You and Blanca did this, not fate. And I'm going to make sure you both pay for what you did to Mia. My words left him frozen for a second, and in that instant, I knew I had planted a seed of fear in him. Without saying another word, I turned and went back to Mia's bedside. The sound of the door closing behind him was the only indication that he had left the room. I stayed by Mia's side, watching her small chest rise and fall with each assisted breath. My mind was in a whirlwind, but there was one certainty that anchored me. I wasn't going to let anyone else make decisions for her. As I passed my hand over her soft hair, I felt a momentary calm, as if her presence gave me the strength to keep going. I knew I couldn't let my guard down, not even for a moment. Lucas and Sandra were unpredictable, and the arrival of the transfer team was still an hour away. Each minute seemed like an eternity, and the weight of fear tried to crush me, but I couldn't let it dominate me. Not now. I decided to step out of the ICU for a moment to talk to the nurse at the desk. I needed to make sure that no one else had access to me until the new doctors arrived. As I explained my request, I noticed the nurse's gaze wavering, her eyes darting to the side, and her voice, although professional, had a tone of discomfort. "Of course, Mrs. Gonzalez, we'll do everything possible to ensure your daughter's safety." But something in her tone didn't convince me. I thanked her for her help and quickly returned to Mia's room. My heart was racing as I knew that Blanca and Lucas were capable of anything, and the way the nurse avoided looking at me directly made me uneasy. Back in Mia's room, I closed the door and leaned against it, trying to gather my thoughts. The hospital, which had once seemed like a place of hope, now felt like a labyrinth full of hidden threats. Every sound of footsteps in the hallway made my heart skip a beat. I looked at Mia again, her pale skin reflecting the dim light of the room, and for a moment, I wondered how we had ended up here. When had Lucas stopped being the man who had sworn to protect us and become someone capable of betraying us like this? Every happy memory I had with him now seemed like a carefully constructed lie. It wasn't even 10 minutes before someone knocked on the door. My entire body tensed up. I opened it just a crack, enough to see who was on the other side. It was Blanca, wearing her impeccable uniform, her brown hair pulled back into a perfect bun, and holding a folder. Her smile was almost sweet, but her gray eyes were cold. "Layla," she said in a measured tone, as if trying to calm me down. "I just want to talk to you. I know this is difficult, but we're all here to help you make the best decision." My anger rose like a wave, but I kept the door open just a crack, not inviting her in. "You have nothing to say to me, Blanca. I don't trust you or your diagnoses, so please leave." But she didn't move, only inclining her head slightly, as if studying my decision. "This could cost you a lot, not just you, but Mia too," she said, her words like a knife trying to pierce my determination. But I wasn't going to back down. My hand trembled as I held the door open, but I wasn't going to show weakness in front of her. "Blanca, I'll tell you one more time, stay away from my daughter and me. I won't let you play with Mia's life. So take your veiled threats and leave." Her smile faltered for a moment, but then returned, this time with a hint of defiance. "Layla, I know you're angry. It's normal, but you need to think with a clear head. Mia is suffering. The best thing you can do for her is to let her go. That transfer won't change anything, and you know it." Her tone was so controlled that it enraged me even more. I slammed the door shut without saying another word. I knew that trying to reason with her was useless. To Blanca, Mia was just a pawn in her plan. The sound of her footsteps fading away gave me a brief sense of relief, but I knew this wasn't the end. My mind was racing, analyzing every word, every gesture of Blanca's. There was something in her confidence that unsettled me, as if she already had the situation under control. I paced back and forth in the room, trying to calm down, but the feeling that something was going to happen wouldn't leave me alone. I decided to call the transfer team again to confirm that everything was still on track. When they assured me that they were less than half an hour away, I felt a spark of hope. I just had to stay firm a little longer. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. I was watching the clock on the wall, counting down the minutes, when the sound of the door opening abruptly startled me. This time, it wasn't Blanca, but Lucas, with an expression I had never seen before. He was furious, his cheeks red and his jaw clenched. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Layla? You know how much pressure I'm getting from all the doctors. You're putting me in danger with your craziness," he spat, slamming the door shut behind him. I stood up, crossing my arms, and faced him. "Don't talk to me about danger, Lucas. You and Blanca are the real danger here, not me. Every second Mia stays here is a second they can't touch her, and I'll do everything necessary to keep her safe." Lucas ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he made when he was on the verge of losing control. "This is ridiculous, Mia is not going to wake up. Layla, it's time to accept reality." My heart was pounding, but I couldn't let him see my fear. "The reality is that you're willing to sacrifice our daughter for your own interests," I replied, looking him straight in the eye. The reality is that you used me, manipulated me, and now expect me to close my eyes and sign her death sentence. But that's not going to happen. His eyes opened a little wider, as if my words had physically hit him. For a second, the silence between us was so dense it seemed to fill every corner of the room. Lucas finally looked down, but not out of shame, rather because he was calculating his next move. Do you really think you can take on me and Blanca? This hospital backs us up. No matter how much you protest, everyone knows what's going to happen. His tone had changed, he was no longer shouting, but speaking with a calmness that chilled me to the bone. But I wasn't going to let him see my fear. I looked at him with a sarcastic smile, inclining my head slightly. You know what, Lucas? I used to think you had a little humanity left. Now I see you're worse than a stranger. At least they don't try to steal a child's heart to save another. I didn't expect my words to affect him, but I saw a flash of something in his eyes, as if my accusations had touched a deep place he preferred to keep hidden. This isn't about me, Layla. This is about Mia and her suffering. I know you're upset, but you can't let your emotions cloud your judgment. I felt my anger rising from the depths of my chest. The only people here who have let their emotions cloud their judgment are you and Blanca. And you know what? I don't care what you have planned. Mia is leaving this hospital, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. This time, I took a step towards him. Get out, Lucas. I don't want you near her, not today, not ever. Lucas looked at me for a few more seconds, as if evaluating whether it was worth continuing the argument. Finally, he let out a snort and turned on his heels, leaving the room without saying another word. The sound of the door closing behind him resonated like a victory, but I knew I couldn't let my guard down. His attitude, that mix of manipulative calmness and contained fury, left me clear that he wasn't done trying to get his way. I returned to Mia's side, taking her hand between mine. Her small fingers were cold, but I still felt her presence, her life. Hold on, my love. Mom's here. I won't let anyone hurt you, I whispered, as my silent tears fell onto the bed. A few minutes passed before I decided to do something I had been avoiding. I took my phone and searched for the contact of the private detective I had hired a few days ago. He was a man recommended by my father, with a rough voice and an experience that reflected in every word he said. When he answered, I quickly explained what had happened that day and asked him to focus on Blanca. I need to know everything about her. What she does, who she talks to, what she's hiding, and I need proof as soon as possible. He asked a few more questions before hanging up. My heart was pounding with anticipation. I knew I couldn't confront Lucas and Blanca directly without something that would destroy them completely, and I was determined to find it, no matter the cost. After hanging up the call, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The detective was my best chance at uncovering everything Blanca and Lucas were trying to hide. I knew the truth was out there, waiting to be revealed, but every minute felt like an eternity. I looked at the clock in the room again, and there were only 15 minutes left until the transfer team arrived. My heart was filled with hope. I approached the window, where the city lights shone in the distance, trying to calm my thoughts. That's when I noticed a movement in the hallway through the partially open door. It was Blanca and Lucas, talking in hushed tones. The way they leaned in towards each other, with tense expressions, made me clench my fists. Suddenly, Lucas looked towards the door, as if he felt like he was being watched. I quickly closed the window and returned to Mia's side, trying to act as if nothing was wrong. A few seconds later, the door opened without warning. Blanca entered first, with her calculated and cold expression, followed by Lucas, who carried an air of dangerous determination. Layla, Blanca said, with that voice that feigned concern, we've spoken to the hospital administration, and they agree that you're acting irrationally. We've taken measures to protect Mia, you can't keep her here. My heart stopped for a moment, wondering what that meant. Before I could respond, Blanca continued, the medical team will arrive soon to disconnect her. It's the best for her, and you can't stop us. My entire body froze upon hearing those words, but I quickly felt a wave of determination take over. I stood between them and Mia's bed, like a wall that wouldn't be broken. What are you supposed to be doing? You have no right. I'm her mother, and you have nothing to say about her life. Blanca looked at me with that fake smile I had come to hate. Layla, I know this is difficult, but you're acting against Mia's best interests. As her doctor, I'm authorized to make this decision if you won't. My sarcastic laughter filled the room. Authorized? You're not authorized to do anything but lie and manipulate. I won't let you touch my daughter. Lucas took a step forward, trying to intimidate me. Layla, please, don't make this any harder than it already is. You have nowhere to go. This is the best hospital, and you know there's nothing you can do to change the situation. But just then, the sound of wheels approaching from the hallway caught our attention. The transfer team had arrived. 2 doctors with impeccable uniforms and serious faces entered the room, followed by a middle-aged woman with a determined expression. Mrs. Gonzalez, the woman said, while approaching me, ignoring Lucas and Blanca completely, we've come for your daughter. We're ready to transfer her to the hospital you requested. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The hope I had been holding on to finally shone brightly. Blanca and Lucas were paralyzed, exchanging looks of incredulity as the doctors began to prepare Mia for the transfer. I could see how the facade of control they had maintained throughout this whole time was starting to crack. This can't be happening, Blanca muttered, taking a step forward. This decision is invalid. Mia is under my medical care, and I won't let you take her away. But before she could intervene, the woman in charge of the transfer team, Dr. Linares, turned to Blanca with an authoritative expression that made her stop in her tracks. Dr. Linares, this mother has every right to decide the best care for her daughter. If you try to interfere, we'll have to notify the authorities. Blanca's face transformed from anger to panic in a matter of seconds, and Lucas soon followed suit. It was clear they hadn't expected me to have this kind of support. I stood by Mia's side as the medical team carefully disconnected her from the hospital machines and connected her to the portable equipment that would keep her stable during the transfer. My heart was racing, but this time it was with relief. Finally, something was going right. Lucas tried to approach me, but I held up my hand firmly. Don't come any closer. This is over. You and Blanca no longer have power over us. Mia will be safe, away from you both. His face hardened, but he said nothing, perhaps because he knew he had finally lost control. As the transfer team carefully moved Mia's gurney towards the hallway, I felt a part of me breathe again after so long. But I knew I couldn't let my guard down yet. I followed closely, ensuring Blanca and Lucas didn't try anything desperate. Just before we reached the elevator, Lucas grabbed my arm, forcing me to stop. Layla, you're making a mistake. This won't bring her back. You're just prolonging the inevitable. Think about what you're doing. His voice was an urgent whisper, almost pleading, but his grip betrayed his frustration. I looked him straight in the eye, with all the firmness I had accumulated on this journey of struggle. Lucas, you no longer have power over me or Mia. Everything you've done will come back to haunt you, and you know it. His expression changed in that moment, as if he finally understood he had lost. He released my arm and, without another word, stood in the hallway, watching as the elevator doors closed with us inside. I felt a wave of relief mixed with inexplicable sadness. As much as I hated him now, I had once loved him, and it was heartbreaking to accept what he had become. When the elevator doors opened, the medical team rushed to take us to the waiting ambulance outside. The cool night air hit my face, taking some of the weight I had carried for days. I got into the vehicle with Mia, taking her hand once more. This time, her fingers felt a little warmer, and my heart filled with hope. I knew we were on our way to a better future.